Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Hub Underground. Matt Dolloff here with Ty Anderson, as we are every single episode. You can, of course, get us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, sometimes on YouTube. We will be on YouTube for this episode because, as you can see, this is a remote episode if you're on YouTube. You can probably tell by the audio as well because the audio is just not even close to the studio quality of 98.5 The Sports Hub. But circumstances outside of our control, we are remote today, but we got some stuff to get to. Ty, I want to start you off.
It's a monsoon outside. That's the circumstance. It's a monsoon.
Yeah, it's wet. It's wet out there, and I feel a little bit under the weather too. I probably shouldn't have even gone to the office.
Oh, great!
Even if it was sunny out today. So
great. Can't wait.
I'm gonna spit on my monitor and get you sick, Ty.
Yeah, you sneezed all over my desk, eating all my snacks.
I definitely ate all the snacks. I gotta. I am due to replace the snacks in there.
It's all right. Just we don't want our coworkers knowing that my desk is full of snacks.
Oh my God. No, tell them there's a money-making opportunity in there. That'll solve our problems. I'm going to start you off with a pop quiz, Ty.
Yeah.
This will be very easy, though. I expect you're going to get this. I just want to see how fast you can get this. This is from a quiz that was in the Boston Globe last weekend. You have to name 4 coaches that coached the Bruins but won a Stanley Cup with another team. Go.
After coaching the Bruins or just in general?
Before or after. They coached the Bruins, but they won with another team.
Bruce Cassidy, Mike Sullivan, Pat Burns, Mike Keenan, but
yeah!
that was before. That was before he coached the Bruins.
It's not after. It's
okay.
It's just at any point in their career, they won with a different team. Like they didn't win with the Bruins, but they won with their team. Okay, you got it. You got it in about 10 seconds. That's what I was about. That's pretty much what I was hoping.
Yeah.
What I was expecting. I expect nothing less from you. I was hoping you'd just rattle it off in 4 seconds, but 10 seconds, that's an acceptable result.
No, I honestly, like for me, like it's easy to remember Sullivan and Cassidy. Burns obviously won it, but like his timeline was so weird. Pat Burns's was, in my opinion, because he was like, he kind of bounced around a little bit and he was out of the game a lot sooner than I would have thought. Granted, circumstances out of his control, but like, with Burns, I'm always like, wait a minute, when did he coach that team? Like when? Okay, where was he? Like, it's kind of like he was one of those coaches that, his timeline, I always kind of get it mixed up. Like when he was, where and where he was when, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He won the Jack Adams for the Bruins, didn't he? Because he was after that horrible Dave Lewis year. They bounced back.
No, Julian was after Dave Lewis. But
right. I'm thinking the other time they sucked.
He did win the Jack Adams though with Boston. I'm pretty sure
it was after the Steve Casper year. I'm thinking of the two different. I was thinking of the other time they were horrible, and then they drafted Joe Thornton. And then Pat Burns won the Jack, and then he won the Cup like 5 years later. Yeah, kind of a strange journey for Pat Burns in his career. But that segues us, Ty, into the latest of the Bruins coaching search. So Pierre LeBrun tweeted earlier today, final interviews next week. Decision to come after that. So end of the month, beginning of June, we'll expect the actual news on the new coach probably to drop. So they've talked to a lot of people. So a lot of names that we already knew: Marco Sturm, Jay Woodcroft, Joe Sacco still in the mix, Jay Leach. I thought it was funny you mentioned Joe Sacco like 5th on the list. Like, oh, by the way, the guy that was actually the coach for the last 4 months. But he mentioned 2 other names, one of which we have. I guess you've brought it up before. I didn't really know much about Mitch Love, but whatever you could tell us about him. And then the other one is Luke Richardson, which is. Anyone who listens to this podcast who was watching the NHL back in 1999, the same year this hat was made, the year the Dallas Stars won the Stanley Cup, is familiar with Luke Richardson. I was like, is that Luke Richardson, the defenseman? And yes, it is the same Luke Richardson that played like 28 years in the NHL. And then he was the Blackhawks head coach the last few years. They obviously have not played well under Luke Richardson's leadership. So it's a little curious that he's in the mix there. But I don't know. What do you know about him and Mitch Love? What you can tell us about them and just, how they would fit here?
Yeah, well, I think with Mitch Love, you look at what he's done before. He's been an assistant with the Capitals now for the last 2 seasons under Spencer Carberry. He's helped run their back end. You look at their defense and the way that guys like Jacob Chikrin have broken through. Like, that would make sense, I think, for the Bruins. A team that, again, wants to evolve offensively while staying true to their defensive roots. I think a guy who's run the Capitals defense would check that box for sure. Before the Capitals, he was with Calgary's minor league team, which at the time, I think for both seasons, I think both seasons in Calgary with that pipeline, I want to say he had Dustin Wolf, who's emerged as a great goaltender since in Calgary. I think he had him for both those seasons. I know he had him for at least one, but you look at that record they posted in those 2 years as with Love as the head coach, like, it was a good record. I think they got to the third round, I think, one year. I think that was their high point. They were the Stockton Heat, and then they were like the Calgary Wranglers. Like, they changed their name but they've always been Calgary's minor league team, but like they changed their name and city, whatever. So he's got results there, as a head coach. That is something the Bruins have stressed, that like they do want some form of head coaching experience. And, if not in the NHL, in the AHL. And so he has that. And so I think that is, that's a guy that I've speculated about on this podcast, being like, I'm curious if they'd be interested in him. Now we have confirmation that they have interviewed him. So that'd be an interesting candidate. Luke Richardson, I don't know, man. That's really hard because he was put in a bad spot in Chicago. A team that was just not competitive, right? A team that was tanking for Connor Bedard and tanking for high draft picks. And so with that in mind, it's hard to get a great scope of how good or bad a coach is, right? When they're operating under those circumstances. He's also been around forever. Like, to your point, like, he played forever, but he's been involved in coaching a lot of teams now. I think he was a coach in Montreal. He was an assistant in Long Island. He was an assistant at Ottawa, I believe. So he's been around for a long time, in terms of like his coaching resume. Just not a lot of head coaching experience. And the one he did have was as a tank commander. So a little curious there. But yeah, I mean, I think these are the usual suspects, right? And Steve Conroy from the Boston Herald had some reporting yesterday where Sweeney said they're not talking to guys they're still coaching. So that would eliminate Misha Donskov from the mix. That would eliminate anybody from the Panthers or the Hurricanes. I'm not sure they're interviewing Tim Gleason on the Hurricane staff, or Tomo Rutu on the Florida staff. But yeah, like, so that would eliminate, in theory, some of those guys and some of those candidates that we had talked about before. So we're in the home stretch now. If I were to try to handicap it, I do believe your big three here, so to speak, would probably be Sturm, Mitch Love, and you know what? I'll say Jay Leach, because I know how much they like him and value him in that organization. So I'd say those would be your big three coaching candidates right now entering here the final stretch. But what the hell do I know? The Bruins don't want to tell you anything. It's by design. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, the impenetrable fortress that is 100 Causeway Street, or 100 Legends Way, whatever the address is there. Yeah, I think the common thread is that these guys don't have a ton of head coaching experience in the NHL overall, so they'd probably be affordable candidates. So I think they just got to figure out among these guys with little experience head coaching who has the best combination of skills, acumen, does what they're going to want to do on the ice, and has a chance to get better over the next few years, sort of grow together with the roster, like we were saying last year. So they're going to have to land on one of the, someone that could bring all that to the table. I would say Marco Sturm probably fits that bill. Jay Leach is a guy that he's been in the organization, so like maybe he has a leg up in that department. So I would say like that's a good big three. I feel like that might be the big two. So we'll see how that shakes out. Do you have any other thoughts on the coaching search before we move on to the topic that everybody wants to hear about?
Not as much. Like, I just think that nothing that I haven't already said, right? That like you can't hire for 2 years. You got to hire for 5 years or 6 years. Like, you got to hope that whoever you hire is truly in the mix, 5 years from now, versus just oh, we're looking for a quick bump and we're gonna fire this guy by 2028. Like I understand that the league is changing and shelf life is short for a lot of these coaches, but like it shouldn't be, right? Like it really shouldn't be. Like I think the best franchises have stability. I think the best franchises have a system and a structure that works. You know, like Paul Maurice, right? He's been there since 2022, 23. That was his first year, the year they bumped the Bruins in the first round. Like he's not leaving unless he retires, right? They're not firing him, and it's been 3 seasons. And so, you know, Jared Bednar in Colorado's been there for a decade. John Cooper's been there for a decade. Brindamore's been there since what, 2017, 2018, thereabouts. Like you got to break that cycle. You can't just cling to, well, the shelf life is short. Like, no, like you want to be sustainable. You want to have that sustainability. It begins with your coaching staff and implementing a system and a structure that makes sense. So I hope that they lean younger with this hire, because I do think you envision that guy being here in 5 years. I think that would be my ultimate goal if I'm making this hire and I'm the Boston Bruins.
I completely agree with that. And I feel like that is another reason that they're sort of, you know, leaning younger, less experienced, but, you know, a guy that can sort of come into his own here and maybe establish himself and, you know, establish a long-standing relationship with the team and all that. So I think that is it seems like that's the direction they're going, and I don't blame them for doing that. Hopefully they do lean in the direction of stability, which brings us to the next topic, Ty. This is the one that, you know, probably everyone's waiting for our thoughts on it. Anyone that listens to this podcast is waiting to see what we thought of the news that the Bruins have retained GM Don Sweeney for another 2 years after next season. So he's in it for, you know, 3 more years, potentially. You never know how these things turn out. You wrote about this at 985thesportshub.com. You gave a list of thoughts on the Sweeney extension. And, you know, that's, you know, 3 years doesn't necessarily mean a lifetime deal. You know, they could still get out of it if they really have to. If they suck again next year, like if it's another disaster season, like maybe they decide they want to blow that part of the team up and start from scratch there. But I think your talk about stability and a 5-year plan and that sort of thing, I think that seems to extend to the front office as well. And so, look, if you hate Don Sweeney and you feel like he's made coaches sort of the scapegoats over the last several years, I'm not going to push back too hard on it with you. He's cycled through a lot of coaches lately. He's only done a couple of actual head coach searches, but like he's you know, the coaches have been the fall guy for a lot of mistakes that I think he and Cam Neely have made, and so they've survived that. They've gotten out of that storm. And then they went through all these moves at the deadline. They sort of restocked their draft picks and their young prospects, and so be interesting to see what they do with those pieces, who stays, who, like, how the roster is constructed. But it feels like they're going with Neely, Sweeney, new head coach, like basically in it for the long haul. Like, I don't know how long the long haul really is, but if you ask me, Ty, like they're gonna weather the storm here. Like they're not gonna turn around and fire Don Sweeney, you know, a year after giving him an extension. In that case, why didn't you just do it now? Like, that would be an indicator that they didn't necessarily learn from their mistakes about going into a lame duck year with Jim Montgomery. And so, yeah, a 3-year deal like doesn't necessarily mean they have to lock him in forever. But this to me says that they, you know, what we've believed for a long time is that Charlie Jacobs himself believes in Cam Neely and Don Sweeney, and he thinks they could get him out of this mess. Neely believes Sweeney can get him out of this mess. They're going to hire a new head coach, and this group is going to stay together for several years going forward. And we just got to hope for the best, right? So that's my thought on it. What's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty obvious that they were not going to move on from him. You know, as we've said on this podcast before and on the radio, it's like, you know, you don't let him do the things that he did at the trade deadline if you're moving on, right? Like Brandon Carlo, and I understand Bruins fans look at Brandon Carlo and they want him to be better. They want him to be tougher and be all that. He makes $4.1 million. I mean, that contract was about to become a pretty good value for the Bruins. I think, especially when you look at the way that guy is going to be getting paid now, especially right shot D. So, like, you don't agree to move on from a guy like that and a guy like Charlie Coyle unless you believe that, okay, you got a plan here, right? And you're going to see the plan through or try to see it through as best you can, you know, without completely sacrificing your future. So they are giving him that chance. I wrote that yesterday. They're giving him the chance at correcting 2015, where they had all these picks and they fumbled them. Now he's being given another chance to rebuild the pipeline with picks. If you don't want to use all the picks, okay, we'll trade some of them or use them on an offer sheet, whatever you want to do. Like, you have the chance here to kind of start anew. You have David Pastrnak, you have Charlie McAvoy, Hampus Lindholm, Elias Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, Jeremy Swayman. Like those are your guys that you look at, right? And they're not all untouchable, but like that's kind of what you're building around right now. You're looking at those 5 or 6 pieces and going, okay, this is what we got. This is what we got to build around. And so it's not too dissimilar from 2015 when you had Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, Chara, and Rask, and you kind of knew, okay, we're going to build around these guys. We gotta supplement them and bring in help, however we do it. Like, we got to do it this way. Like, it's not too different. And so now you got to rebuild the right way. And so we got to see if they do that. But yeah, he wasn't going anywhere. I think if you want to look at it and oversimplify it like I do, they believe in him half as much as they did in 2022. 22, we got a 4-year extension. This time it gets a 2-year extension. So they are saying, we're going to see your plan, but we're also going to give ourselves an out if the plan is shit. Like, that's kind of where I think they are right now as a franchise. So they're giving him the benefit of the doubt, but they're kind of saying, yeah, we don't believe in you as much as we did back then. So let this plan better work, man. That's kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, but like, so the draft picks, though, the draft part of that, like, it's not going to be immediate to see like the impact of these drafts coming up. Like,
it could be.
It could be 2
like,
or 3 years.
Like, it could be in the sense that, like, okay, like, don't you feel a lot better about the pipeline, Matt, if they draft Liam Greentree a year ago instead of Dean Letourneau, and Greentree puts up 100 points, in the OHL, and you're like, okay, you got something here. Like, you can like, you're not going to know how good they are as an NHL player, but you can go, that's our new top prospect. Sure. Right now, like, who's their new top prospect? We don't know.
Yeah, like McAvoy is a guy. Yeah, like McAvoy, they drafted 14th overall, and then a year later he's at BU, and it's like, oh my god, he's like one of the top prospects, and like he jumped.
Right.
So I guess you got to hope for something like that.
Right, and I think where they are right now, like, Letourneau has 3 assists in 36 games for BC a year ago. In theory, he should be your top prospect. In reality, you're like, I don't know. Like, I hope he's good, but if you drafted Liam Greentree, who went 1 pick later to LA, Greentree this year for Windsor, 49 goals, 119 points in 64 games. Like, you're going, that's our top prospect. That's who we got. We know that guy's going to be good. Right now, the Bruins don't really have that. And so I think that's like the answer you could get, Matt, to your point. Like, if you nail the 7th overall pick, he might not be here next season, but if he's in the O or the W or the Quebec junior, like Mitch Jr., and he's got 80 points through 50 games, you're feeling pretty good about it, right? Like, you kind of know what you have there.
You hope that you get like a Will Zellers situation, but it's their own guy that they drafted, right? Like, Will Zellers just won the USHL Player of the Year. He was a 2nd-round pick. Now it feels like he could be better than that draft stock indicated, offensively anyway. So. We'll see how that shakes out, but it's going to be, especially that 7th pick, Ty, that 7th overall pick, whoever they take there. Like, yes, you hope he pops in sort of wherever he plays, his first year after getting drafted. But he's got to be up here within the time frame of Sweeney's contract. He's got to be in the NHL, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be a stud right out of the gate. Like, we don't need a Kirill Kaprizov like scoring 70, 80 points as a rookie. But, like, can he come up and score, 50, 60 points? Like sort of like a David Pastrnak where, like, yeah, he's not scoring 100 points just yet, but, like, you see the skill and you see the production and, like, you see the potential for more. And so, I don't know, like, what are your just say they draft, one of these center prospects with that 7th pick, and it's like, it's not like a guy that's off the board. It's a guy that's sort of expected. Like, what would be a good timeline for you for that pick? Like, in the NHL within, call it 2 years, 2 years, on Don Sweeney's contract, and like, what his role is when he comes up here.
I think you want him challenging for NHL minutes and an NHL role in training camp 2026. I think that's probably what you want. Like, you want him challenging. Doesn't mean he gets it, but you want him making a legit push. And it's kind of funny. Like, I'm sitting here now my mind is like kind of I'm racking my brain trying to think of the last Bruins prospect that had a year that left us going, oh man, I'm excited for this guy. Like you mentioned McAvoy. Like, if not McAvoy, is it Anders Bjork? You know, the year that he was at Notre Dame and they made it to the
Yeah.
Frozen Four.
Yeah,
Where
there was a lot of buzz around him before he got here.
yeah, he had like 50 points, I think, in like 35 games, something like that. Like I might be a little off there, but like
That's a good
that,
point. He was a BU guy, and then he played Notre Dame,
yeah,
and like he's he's excelling at Notre Dame. It's like, oh my god, they found something here, and he never really panned out.
right. And but that's probably the last time that you were tracking like a Bruins prospect and feeling really good about their game.
That's
Like
true.
like Poitras
Ridiculous.
had like 70 assists, I think, for his final year in the for the Storm.
Yeah,
So like
Poitras might have been a guy that we were tracking if he stayed in the minor. He came up pretty quickly. So he might have been a guy that we were tracking if he stayed down in the minors or the juniors.
Like DeBrusk, the year after his draft, he had like an injury-plagued season for Swift Current. So like he wasn't really one of those guys that you were able to track because of the injuries. Like it's just kind of funny they haven't had a prospect that you've looked at and be able to track and be like legit excited for. And by that I mean like high-end prospect. You know what I'm saying? Like, and yeah, part of that's they've traded picks, but like first round picks were Trent Frederick at Wisconsin and Johnny Beecher at Michigan playing in a bottom 6 role. Like you haven't had that, oh my God, he's coming, kind of moment with a prospect in a long time.
Yeah, no, we're starving, Ty. We need it.
We really are.
Latorno is like, that's why Latorno's a little extra disappointing that he's been so slow to produce at BC. But there were the talk that like he went up too quickly to BC. So I don't know. Like, do you know anything about Latorno, his development? Like, do you think maybe going up a year or two early might have like hurt his development, or do you feel like maybe he could like pop a little bit next year? No, next year being the year that he should have been getting to college. Hopefully that that quick ascent to BC didn't like set him back is sort of what I'm hoping.
Yeah. The people I've talked to, like, both independently and people more in the organization. I mean, it's just been he shouldn't have been there this year. He should have gone it's funny. We're talking about like a prospect that like we hope pops. Like if he was in the USHL this year, he may be that guy where he puts up 40 goals and 60 points in 60 games or whatever, and just feeling a lot better about it. So like there is that, like where you want to, like the way it was described to me was that he was trying to jump 2 levels basically. Like you going from Canadian prep or just prep school, you don't have to call it Canadian prep. You go from prep school to college hockey, without that kind of buffer in the middle. It's a challenging task, and then you're doing it as a 4th liner on a good BC team. Like it's a hard challenge, right? And so, people aren't down on him. People I've talked to say like he's got a lot of work in front of him, but it was a tough spot to succeed, right? And again, my response has always been, well, why did they do that then? Why didn't he go? Why did he go to the USHL then? Like, but again, you can't undo that, and it's a whole big thing. But no, they're not out on him. It's just it's a timeline thing. Like it's going to be a long timeline, and so you hope that this upcoming season he's 2nd or 3rd line versus 4th line. If he's 4th line again. If I'm the Bruins, I'm probably getting in his ear and saying, you got to transfer. You got to go somewhere else. Like, this isn't working for you or for us right now. You need to play. You need minutes. That was the biggest thing I was told. He needs to play. He's only going to get better if he plays. If he's only playing 8 minutes a night, he's not going to grow. It's just not going to happen. So he's got to play more, or he's got to go someplace else where he can play more. That's the biggest thing with him moving forward into 2025, 26.
Yeah, so I hope he just doesn't get, jerked around and, he goes up and down in terms of minutes and his role and all that. And like, hopefully you don't kill his confidence, and hopefully he does get, the kind of the opportunity to put the work in that that we're hoping for going forward. So, he's a guy to watch, not yet a guy to get excited about. So we're still waiting on that prospect to get excited about, as we just went over in this tangent we've been going on about the Bruins prospects. But circling back to Don Sweeney, who is, again, signed for 2 more years after next year. So we're, possibly into the next 3 seasons with Don Sweeney as the Bruins GM. One interesting point that I thought you made in your column at 985thesportshub.com, go read it, is that He's a veteran GM now, and it's time to start acting like it. It's time for him to put the big boy pants on and make some big boy moves. And so it's not that his deadline trades that weren't, sort of big boy moves, but to me, it's a lot easier to just ship out a bunch of high draft picks for an expiring contract. It's a lot harder to go pry a restricted free agent away from a rival team for an offer sheet and things like that. And so he needs to start making some big boy GM moves because he is one of the big boys. As we can quibble over how good or bad he is at his job, but he's a guy that's been at this for a while now, and he's got a lot on his plate. He's got a big offseason here to try to, rebuild this roster sort of on the fly and get them right back to, at least playoff contention, imminently. And so he's got to start making some bold moves if he's going to do that. And so I'll let you expound upon that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how did the Blues get back to being the Blues this year? They moved ahead with 2 offer sheets. They said, I'm not going to play nice. I'm going to submit 2 offer sheets. And they bring in 2 players that help them win games. Look at where the Bruins came up short a year ago, in my opinion, was the Linus Ullmark trade. Why are you not making the Senators eat more money on Korpisalo or give you another pick? They want Linus Ullmark. They don't want Jonas Korpisalo. Make them give you more. Steve Stais was a rookie GM. And Don Sweeney's being a nice guy. Why are you being a nice guy? You don't got to do that. The goal is to win, not help your division rivals build a better roster. Go back to Chris Drury. Chris Drury was able to dump the Barclay Goodrow contract on the Sharks. Didn't have to eat any money. Then he was able to dump the Jacob Trouba contract on the Anaheim Ducks, retain no money. Then why is Don Sweeney attaching picks to dump his bad contracts? I get it. Cap space is different. But it feels like Don Sweeney is not managing the way that a veteran GM's got to manage, right? That you're going to call that other team's bluff and say, you want the player or not? Because we'll find somebody else, right? Like, it feels like the Bruins have never been able to get that bailout that other GMs have been able to get, right? Or that extra asset that other GMs have been able to get. And I think his deadline this past year was solid. It was good. But then, you look at all the conditions on the picks they're getting and you're like, okay, well, all right. Like, can it be better? Like, you've been on the job now for 10 years, right? The only guys that have been here longer have been on it for closer to 15. Jim Nill, Kevin Cheveldayoff, and Doug Armstrong. All of them, in my opinion, GM like veteran GMs. They will not help you out. They are more cutthroat and more ruthless than Don Sweeney has been. The guys aren't helping you out. The other teams aren't helping you out. So stop helping them. Be a ruthless executive. Be a guy who says, we're here to win, not to be friendly in the group chat. That's great. Like, guess what happens? There's a group chat with 32 NHL GMs in it. And as soon as you get fired, you get kicked out of that group chat. That is a real thing that is in this league.
Really?
Yes. So they're ruthless.
He doesn't want to get kicked out of the group chat.
They're ruthless. So be ruthless too. Submit an offer sheet. Say to a team, we're not going to help you. Give us more. We'll help you. We're not just going to do it just because. That is something that I think Sweeney has been guilty of in the past, is playing too nice. I think he's been playing too nice with teams for a long time now. And, if the Bruins are going to truly commit a retool on the fly, there's no room for being a nice guy. You got to be ruthless. And he was ruthless at the deadline, but it's got to keep going here now. And I think that's going to be the challenge for him and the Boston Bruins to get truly back being competitive. You have to be aggressive. You have to GM like they are your enemies, not your friends. Because that's what they are at the end of the day. You're trying to win a championship. They're not your friends. You got to GM like you want to win games, not just stay cordial.
It's in your house. Good friends, better enemies. When Shawn Michaels and Diesel faced off for the WWF Championship. That's what we're friends, but we're better if we're competing against each other.
That's right.
Sorry for the wrestling reference. I know people don't like that stuff. Except, underground listeners kind of like it. The best way to send that kind of message, Ty, is to do an offer sheet. Like, I'm going to take your player, You have to send. I'll send you a draft pick or whatever, but I'm going to take this player that you might want to develop. But like, no, I'm gonna swoop in and take that guy. Like they might need to send that message if they're used to him being the nice guy, and they think like, oh, we'll get Don to roll over. Old Don, he's going to do what we want him to do. He's going to turn around and be like, no. He's going to tell them like, I'm not doing that anymore for you.
Right. I mean, the Bruins couldn't give away Mike Riley. They couldn't give away Craig Smith when they were trying to, right? But the Rangers can dump Jacob Trouba and get assets back, right? They can dump Barclay Goodrow and be totally okay. Like, why? Why can't you do that? What is it? Like, what is it about you that other GMs prey on, right? Like, you got to drop that from your bag, and you got to start, GMing like somebody who's had the job for 10 years. And I don't think that's an unfair demand, because that's the only way that you're going to be truly an elite team again. You're not going to be an elite team saying, no, it's okay. We'll take a third instead of a second. Yeah. No, get the damn second.
No. Get the damn second. That might be the podcast title. He's back, folks. Don Sweeney is back. I'm sure a lot of people feel great about that. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a good thing about Don Sweeney. You also mentioned this in your story that like the Sweeney hate goes overboard, and I tend to agree with that. It's like if he's like the worst GM of all time, like people paint him to be, like how are they still a playoff team a couple years ago? It's like he hasn't been the worst GM of all time. The drafting hasn't been good, obviously. He's made some bad free agent signings, but the trades have been good. And he sort of he retooled this team on the fly a lot of times and sort of kept them in playoff contention. So he's done a decent job overall. Like, I just feel like I feel like it does go overboard to the point they're like, we have to be contrarians to the contrarians. If that makes sense, where contrarian isn't contrarians.
Yeah.
On this very program. It's like, I don't want to like defend Don Sweeney to the death and say he's like the best GM in the league, because he's not. But I don't know. Like, I just don't think he's been so bad that he needs to they need to shit can him for where they've been. Like, this is basically one bad year. It's like, yes, they've come up short. Maybe he's not quite the GM you want him to be in terms of building a Stanley Cup contender, but folks, it could be worse. Is sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think to your it could be worse standpoint, point rather, like, all right, we all agree that somebody like Matthew Darsh, who's down in Tampa as their director of hockey ops and their assistant GM, played with Montreal to end his career. You probably remember him from the 2011 series.
Yeah, I remember that name.
We'd all agree, like, okay, he's got an exciting resume, right? Like, he could be a great GM. You don't know. Like, Julien Brisebois is a great guy to learn from in terms of being a GM, but he's never done it. And if the Boston Bruins are going to make a change, I'm not convinced they're going to hire a guy like that. I'm more convinced they're going to hire a guy like Lou Lamoriello, who's 82 years old, by the way, or Ken Holland, who took the job in LA after they moved on from Rob Blake. Ken Holland, who hasn't built a winner since 2008, by the way, in case you're wondering, like, really did nothing after Lidstrom and Datsuk and Zetterberg, kind of faded out of frame. It's like, it's a very insular job, right? And they only consider a few guys worthy of doing it for whatever reason. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's probably wrong. But again, like, I don't believe there's any job on earth where only 32 people are able to do it. But that's the way the job is, right? And the Boston Bruins know what the Boston Bruins know. And if the Bruins fire Don Sweeney, I would have zero doubt in my mind that Ken Holland and Lou Lamoriello would be at the top of their list. They go, no, those guys. We want to bring in those guys. So it's sort of like the devil you know, right? The devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And Lou Lamoriello would walk in and tell David Pastrnak, hey, cut your hair and change your number down to 10. I don't like 88. That's too high a number. Like, it's not, like, nobody wants that. Like, it's not, nobody wants that. Believe me. And
cut your hair.
Yeah, like, come on.
I love that.
It's Mr. Burns walking in, Mattingly, shave those sideburns. Like, it's just, so acknowledging who the Bruins are and what they would do. Like, I think that you go with the devil you know right now. And I agree. Like, I don't think that Don Sweeney is an elite GM. I think he's probably somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, which 7 to 15, maybe. Like
Top 10. Oh.
He's got things that he does really well, and he's got things that he is not good at. I don't think they're good at. We mentioned the trades, right? Like they get bent over a barrel sometimes when they want help, and that's got to change, right? The drafting has not been up to standard, in my opinion, even beyond 2015. 2015 was not good. We all acknowledge it. You got to get over it, though. No one's bringing anything new to the table when we talk 2015. Not a single person. But I also think he's really good at re-signing his guys, and I think he's good at identifying long-term needs and like the Hampus home trade is a great trade for the Bruins. Like it really was. Bring like, but there's two sides to that, right? Like I acknowledge that was a really good trade for the Bruins. I also have to acknowledge, however, that it was a need and a trade largely of their own doing. When you move on from Chara and you move on from Krug and you say, well, we got Zaboral and we got Mike Riley and we got Derek Forbert. It's like, well, no, those guys aren't going to be good enough to replace what you're losing, right? Like, so
got bodies, I guess, but
the Charlie Coyle trade, the Charlie Coyle trade was a great trade for the Boston Bruins when they made it to bring him to Boston from Minnesota.
Yeah.
But you did that because Jacob Forsbacka-Karlsson was not progressing the way that you envisioned him progressing as a second round pick in 2015. Right. Ryan Donato was not progressing as a natural center the way that you envisioned that happening. So he's been good at trades, but they're largely to fill holes that he created himself. So there's two sides of that coin. And I acknowledge that, but
it all goes back to the drafting.
But no GM is perfect, right? Like no GM that you look at is going to build a roster that you go, wow, that's awesome. Like it's very rare. And the guys that do are the top of their class for a reason. Like Bill Zito and Jim Nill are playing in their third straight conference finals for a reason, right? Like they are masterful team builders. And I think that's something that I would take one of those guys over Don Sweeney. Who freaking wouldn't?
Yeah, no, I think I want Jeffrey Lurie to buy the team. And then I want Howie Roseman as GM. Well, no, Howie Roseman can come in as like a consultant. But, then he's got to hire Bill Zito as the GM. And then Zito's got to bring in Rod Brindamore to be the head coach. I think that would be good if they.
And then we also need Pat Riley to be in the stands, looking scary. We need that.
They need to bring in Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux as like consultants.
Hologram Don Zimmer. Hologram Don Zimmer up there as well. Yep. We need them all. No, but like, yeah, if you could build a fantasy roster, yeah, I want Jim Nill. Yeah, I want Doug Armstrong. Yeah, I want one of those guys, but I can't sit here and act like the entire resume of Don Sweeney is poor. I also think what's important, though, is like the self-reflection that he had at the deadline, I thought was important, right? Like there was a self-reflection moment there of like, I built a bad team and I got to sell. And I've never sold before, but I got to sell. And he did it, right? He did it. And so I think he's shown a willingness to change. You just got to see more of that now for him to be a truly elite general manager. I think he's a fine GM. I think he's a good GM. He's got some steps to get to be elite, though. And that's a challenge out in front of him these next couple of years.
That's the thing. I think reality sort of set in for Don Sweeney that he's just been fine over these years. Like where, I think it's sort of them being at the top of the conference and contending for the division every year. Obviously that historic season a couple of years ago, it sort of masked the fact that they haven't been drafting well and like they've had to make all these big trades and go all in and depleting all their draft capital. And so I think the Bills came due and reality set in for Don Sweeney with the way he built last year's roster. And so I was glad to see him realize that, in real time and not sort of try to push forward and get that team into the playoffs. And he went in the opposite direction. So that was a good first step. The high draft pick's another first step, but a lot of steps coming in this offseason for Don Sweeney.
Well, I mean, think about it this way too, Matt. Like, would you rather him not trade first round picks and second round picks when he had Bergeron and Chara and they were trying to go for it? Like, it's part of it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But like, I don't mind them taking the swings. I think they could have taken some bigger swings along the way, but like they were willing, right? Like, and I think the biggest critique that I have of that era is that he realized it was the end when it was too late, right? Like they probably should have taken similarly big swings in 22 and 21 and 19. Like, you kind of waited until 2023, and like, you came up short. You gave a great effort, but you came up short. I do think, though, that, like, if you realize that a little bit sooner, maybe you get one more cup, right? Maybe you get one more appearance, maybe, perhaps, as well. Like, he kind of realized, oh, this is the end, when it was finally the end, right? Where, like, I think Vegas has done a great job of, like, Vegas is just like, you know what? We don't care about the future. We're in it now. So trade everything now, right? Like, and it's helped them, like, I think that's the biggest critique I have, is that they were kind of half in, half out in terms of, like, is this the end? We don't know, but we're going to keep our options open. It's like, nah, just go all in, dude. You got Bertrand, Krejci, and Chara and Marchand. Just keep going for it. Who cares? Like, that's the one thing that I think you can kind of look back on and say, I wish they did that more or a little bit better.
Yeah, no, look, we're obviously left wanting more from that era. And Don Sweeney's a part of that, the way certainly the way he's drafted and the way he's built the team. It hasn't been perfect, hasn't been, good enough. We're not satisfied with just the one cup in 2011 and nothing since then, and 2 disappointing endings in the cup final. Like, look, nobody's saying that it's been good enough, so to speak. I just don't think it's been as bad as people are trying to say it is overall.
Yeah, so I mean, think about this, Matt, right? Like, if Marchand scores on that breakaway in the final moments of Game 5 against Florida in 2023, I mean, the narrative might be a lot different. It honestly might be, because that team, I think, if they get out of that first round, I think they win the cup. I just believe that in my heart of hearts. I have nothing to prove it, obviously, but you look at the path in front of them and who they would have played. I think they would have won that cup in 2023 if they get out of the first round. And that failure, in my opinion, is not on Don Sweeney. That failure is at ice level. It's on the players and it's on the coaching staff that did not do their job in that first round. Don Sweeney gave them like a $90 million roster in an $82 million cap league. And
with no holes, pretty much.
Right. And so the failures were at ice level there, not by anything the front office did. Whereas I think in 2019, you can look at the front office and say, Stanley Cup in your building, Game 7, and Carson Kuhlman is your second line right wing. It's not good enough, right? Like, so I do think there's some of that. But in 2023, like, that was the chance to flip the narrative, and it didn't work out. And you could feel the pain in Don and Cam's voices then, because they knew that was kind of their swan song. Just, you realize it a little bit earlier, might be a little different.
Yeah, it's crazy. I like that moment could have changed the course of the franchise, and the fact that the way it changed includes Brad Marchand being traded to the team that he didn't score on, and now he might win a Stanley Cup with that team. That's pretty crazy to think about. So all right, well, we're gonna get out of here, Ty. Do you have any closing thoughts on the Sweeney news, coaching, anything else with the Bruins?
No, not as much. I do want to touch on what you just mentioned there. Brad Marchand playing for the Florida Panthers. He looks excellent. And I think that really speaks to, if the Bruins drafted better along the way, if they had more high-end talent along the way, this is the role that Marchand will be playing for the Boston Bruins. And they'd be a better team for it. I mean, Brad Marchand is going out there and he's allowed to be the pest. He's allowed to be a forechecking menace, which he always was. But, like, he's doing it in a third line role, right? He's doing it
drawing those secondary matchups.
Yeah,
drawing those secondary matchups have been huge for him.
Right. And he's not playing power play 1 or PK 1 or line 1. No, he's playing line 3, power play 2, PK 3. Like it's kind of funny how, reeling back a little bit on him, he's not wearing a letter, but he's still a leader. Like, he's able to be the Brad Marchand that he was when he was at his absolute best for the Boston Bruins, which in my opinion was, that 2016 to 2019, 2020 range, where he was just a menace, right? He was a puck hounding menace, didn't have all the weight in his shoulders, but, had strong support in front of him and on his line, be it with Bergeron and with Pastrnak and with a power play that had Torrey Krug, dishing out dimes left and right. Like they just, less pressure is a better Marchand. It just is. And I think it's been fun to watch him kind of revert back to being, that player without having the weight of the franchise on his shoulders. And, I think he was a good captain for the Bruins. I'm not saying he was a bad captain, but I do think, like, it's a heavy letter to wear. It just is. Like, it especially for a team that, is in that weird transitional kind of period. Like, watching him, he just looks free, and he looks like the Marchand that, Boston fans fell in love with, 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. He looks reinvigorated. The Panthers look great. Feels like they could be on their way to yet another appearance of this third straight appearance in the Cup final.
That is the only team. That team is the only team that I can see beating them. It really is.
How about those Stars? I thought I was like, oh wow, Edmonton looks great. That feels like the Western Conference Finals. Feels like it could just come down to the goaltending, who makes a stop and who holds their lead. Edmonton couldn't hold a lead. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on the Stars?
Great team, and I think the only team I can see beating Florida, because of the versatility of their back end. Right, you got some big boys back there. You got your Heskinens and you got your Harleys and guys that are really good defensemen, but you also have, your Cody Cece's and your Ilya Labushkins and the guys that can absorb punishment, right, and keep going. And I think that could be a key in a series like a 7-gamer against Florida. And so one thing I'm wondering about here, Matt, and the NHL has prided itself on its parity and the fact that you cannot build super teams and that teams have to manage the cap properly. This is now the third year in a row that we have had Dallas and Florida in the conference final. These are both two teams that are in no income tax states. Look at Tampa, also in Florida, a no income tax state. Look at Nevada, no state income tax. They have been able to build super teams. Look at Nashville. Nashville keeps winning the offseason pretty much every July 1, it feels like. That is another no income tax state. Nashville had a bad team, so we can exclude them, but they're winning the off seasons. They're attracting talent. Is this going to be a problem for the NHL? I would wonder. They pride their league on its parity, but players clearly like going to these cities because you can make the most money, you get the most take home every year. And so is this creating the opposite effect? I don't know how you fix it, but this is becoming a thing now for the league, it feels like.
Yeah, like some kind of competitive balance tax, like the team has to offset whatever the player saves and on the tax bill. I don't know. Some kind of competitive balance tax is the only idea I have. That's just off the top of my head. I don't need any tax experts saying, no, you can't do that. That's just a thought. It's the hard cap gives you some parity, but then when players are able to save, like make more money in another state because of the tax situation, like that, that sort of throws off the balance that the salary cap should provide. So like, I don't know, they just got to find a better way to balance that, I think.
Like, think about if Mikko Rantanen was hitting the open market this offseason, right? Think about like the bidding war that guy would have for his services given the postseason he's had. But he's not, because he was only willing to sign in a few places, the places where he could make the most money. And he ends up in Dallas and he signs an extension and now he's going to be there. And now Dallas is going to be great for likely the duration of his contract. Like,
yep.
It's just like, it's kind of interesting that, he was only willing to go to a few teams, the teams where he can make the most money. And so it kind of zaps your league a little bit. I think if this keeps playing out the way it's played out, where Florida is able to accumulate talent and Tampa is able to accumulate talent and Dallas can accumulate talent and the Golden Knights can keep adding guys, like the rest of your league is going to kind of have a little bit of fatigue going, this sucks. We just can't offer as much money as those guys can. Well, unless we want to completely handcuff our own operation, we can't match what they're going to make. Like Sam Reinhart was making more money this year playing in Florida than Mitch Marner was making playing for the Leafs, despite Marner having a cap hit that I think was like $3 or $4 million higher. Like
that's crazy.
That's crazy. And I don't know what you do to fix that, but if it continues to lead to these teams being so much better than everybody else, it's going to be you're going to have like the same 4 teams every year. And that's not good for the league either. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. Again, to your point and to what we've said, don't know how you fix it, but man, it's starting to become a trend now, it feels like, in the league.
Yeah, there should be something they could, like, it should just be like most money, period. They're like the taxes, the living situation in this particular state really shouldn't be a consideration, unless someone really wants to consider, like, what state do I want to live in? But like taxes shouldn't be as much of a factor as they seem to be. But, well, we're not tax experts. We'll let the league figure that out. Hopefully they do. Hopefully the parity does sort of find a new level and we don't just have Dallas and Florida in the Cup final every single year. because they don't pay any taxes. Maybe move the Bruins to New Hampshire. Maybe that might be an option.
Yes.
Right. We'll see.
I earned my Social Security.
Live free or die. All right. We're gonna get out of here. Ty, any closing thoughts? No, thank you. If you made it this far, thanks. I love you. This is the Sports Hub Underground. I'm Matt Dolloff. He's Ty Anderson. I almost screwed up with the mirror image there on the stream. Thanks for listening, folks. If you made it this far, you can get us at Apple Podcasts and Spotify if you want to listen to us in audio form. But obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you can get all these video episodes on YouTube for sure, and you can get every episode no matter what at 985thesportshub.com and the Sports Hub app. Hit us with a subscribe, hit us with a like, hit us with a comment. Positive comments only, please. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.